So in Brunswick, Missouri, 1887, John Crane walked to the back of the room of Tate's to pick up dry goods. He had unintentionally entered the devil's den. He was a man with good nose for smelling menace, and right at that moment the room reeked of it. Where he had picked up the sixth sense? It had come from experiences of war and law enforcement. Two demanding disciplines that he'd excelled at both. Now at 52 years of age, all that hostility and gunplay was well and truly behind him. Or so he thought. He had taken up employment with Western Union as a telegraph surveyor, and worked out of his Missouri office in Kansas City. However, the majority of his time was spent on his saddle, on his own, identifying potential faults in the wires and poles that connected the towns and settlements to the far east as far as Mississippi. His weekly reports were telegraphed to the local district maintenance crews who would follow up and make repair. It was neither a challenging nor demanding job, nor was it practically paid well, but it was a peaceful life he now craved. Crane's easygoing of a howdy to the foreman standing in a tight circle over seated man in Tate's grain store was met with a look of silent scorn, but he persisted. "Crane's my name. Headed north and dropped in for a bag of beans and some local advice." He smiled but received no response. Silence prevailed for a good while before one of the men said, "You just get your bag of beans and make your way to the front counter, pay up, and move on." "Well, I'd be obliged if we could talk about the lay of the land between here and Marceline. I don't know this country." "Just keep headed northeast, and it is what it is," said another abruptly. "I won't take nothing but a minute of your time, sir." This was again said by Crane with a smile before adding, "Am I disturbing something here?" "Yes, you are. Best you get what you want and go, and best you do it now." Crane knew this was not a request or a direction. It was an ultimatum, clear and simple. He also knew that when a man is told to move on, or worse, turn a blind eye, his character is challenged. If that demand is accompanied by intimidation, then the easy thing to do is walk away. After all what had happened to him around in Brunswick had nothing to do with him. He was just passing through. He'd started his survey at Warrensburg and still had over 100 miles to go in Cahokia. Trouble is, when you bend the will of the man against your conscience, it's hard to bend back and become straight again. And then there is the aftertaste of guilt, and that never quite goes away. But what exactly had Crane stumbled into? Let me tell you. Those four standing cattlemen, as a seated man, an older man, his name was Bose Lillard, who had learnt his trade herding furrow longhorns out of the Texas Panhandle for Charles Goodnight. Illard had held such in high regard by Goodnight that he became his leading hand. However, all that didn't amount of him was Hillard's Brunswick. Illard was in trouble. He had just been accused of trumped-up charges of rustling. Stealing cattle anywhere is a serious matter with grave consequences. The indictment was immediately denied, with Illard saying that all of his herd, some 1,600 head, were clearly mixed up with the T5 brand, and his crew could vouch the same. Trouble was, his crew were all black, so his affirmation was dismissed out of hand. Now, cattle do get mixed up on the open range from time to time. Some of those critters just have a mind to wander. The unwritten law between neighbors is to cut the strays out and drive them back home when time permits. This is usually done when they enough had been identified by the journey worthwhile. But there was nothing neighborly going on here. This was a straight-up false assertion, laid in kangaroo court, that was heading for a lynching black man by four white men acting as a sheriff, judge, and jury. They were also willing executioners of death. Illard would leave his 1,600 herd open to impounding, rebanding, and sale before the authorities could act. So what was going down was a deep, deceptive, and devious plot with murder at its heart. The only fair witness to his travesty of justice was John Crane, yet he knew none of the chicanery at hand. What did he know was one black man was up against four white men. Crane had been around and seen much. He understood the evil of injustice. It came as a legacy from his father, who had been a Methodist preacher, who one actually put his teaching of the Holy Bible into practice. The preacher honestly believed that all men were God's children and that they were created equal. Therefore, they needed time to be treated as such. Regardless of what birth had been denied or bestowed upon them, the view of the world had a sacred mark upon John Crane, as clear as a brand. However, he was no preacher like his father. He was given up on hope and prayer as the answer. He knew that those who commit prejudice can never be appeased. It was better to meet them head on and fight it out. And of course, that meant the use of force. There was also something to make up of Crane. He was a Texan. Texans don't like to be pushed around, corralled, or told what to do now. Some say it comes from the water they drink, and if it is true, the water must come from San Antonio River that runs right next to the Alamo. I've never met a Texan who will back down for a fight for freedom, be it to speak his mind, travel the roads unimpeded, or choose his friends. Both looked up and Crane and said, I know that country between here and Cahokia. I can tell you the lay of the land. Well, I'll be obliged, said Crane. He won't be telling you anything, cut in the cattleman sitting in the middle. Why is that now? Because I said so. The man delivering this proclamation was Frank Bellum. He was a big man with a big reputation for putting people in the place, or at least where he believed their place should be, and sometimes that had been in the ground now. John Crane didn't know who he was, but he did pick the fight with his head honcho as the three accepted his decree with a grin, which reminded Crane of seeing some dumb steers falling in behind a cow with a bell around his neck. Crane shook his head and said, Unless you were to lay the law. The dumb steers falling in behind a cow with the bell around his neck. Crane shook his head. Unless you are the law and have this man under arrest, he has the right to talk to whoever he likes, said one of the others, referring to Bellum. I can't see his arm now, said Crane. He doesn't need one, said another. Why is that now? Everyone in this town works for Frank Bellum, including the sheriff. Crane shook his head a little, while still smiling. Next you'll be telling me so does the judge. The three grinned like hyenas while Bellum stared straight like John Crane and said, Just get what you came for and leave this business to us now. And what business is that? Asked Crane. Bellum was getting angry. You don't want to know. It has nothing to do with you. So get moving. I beg to differ. This man is wearing a Texas star on his belt buckle. I'll wear one too. It identifies one Texan to another now. For a moment, the faces on the Crane looked bewildered, and that included both of them. Bellum finally said, You just don't know when to shut up and walk away, do you now? Crane dropped his head and thought for a moment before lifting to say, No, I guess I do not. So what do you suggest now? Just do as you're told and ride off to northeast and forget you ever here, offered Bellum. Yes, I do suppose that is one solution, but it's not going to work, said Crane. Bellum's eye narrowed. And why is that? Crane thought for a moment before answering. I will now become part of your problem, sir. This seemed to bewilder Bellum, who said, And what problem is that? I'm now a witness, a white witness. If anything unfortunate was to come to this fellow Texan, and am I called to provide testimony under oath, then I'm going to tell it straight, and that might prove difficult. What makes you think we could ever let you testify against us? Said one of the cattlemen. Crane nodded. You're right, he said before adding, but to stop me, you'd have to kill me first. The grins and smirks as Bellum said, That's the first thing you got right, boy, since you walked in here, mister, and began poking your nose in other people's business. Yes, probably is, said Crane. Which leaves me one choice. If I want to leave here standing up, and why is that? And what's that? I kill you first. Some mock laughter accompanied the question. And how are you going to make that happen? Being fast in interview, I guess. They laughed again. No one is that fast. Not 4 against 1. Crane nodded in agreement. Yeah, even at my best, which was a few years ago. Now, it would have been a tall order. But I can tell you how this is going to work. How? Asked Bellum. I'm going to go down fighting now, said Crane. And I know for certain that I will take one of you with me with my first shot. Not sure who that'll be, though. But nothing is certain in a gunfight now. With all that excitement and confusion that gets generated and being an ex-lawsman, I'm pretty confident I can get a good second shot. That is a 50-50 chance of survival now. And with a bit of luck, and I can get lucky sometimes, I could get in the third accurate shot, even if I am to hit myself. Now, I've shot straight when wounded before, so I'll just leave one standing. Trouble is, neither nor I can be sure exactly who that will be. When shots are being exchanged, at a rapid rate in confined space, it is impossible to determine who in advance. Confusion was now writ large on the 4 faces of both that looked in on astonishment. This is crap, said Bellum. Just take him, Clem. Crane identified Clem immediately, who was standing to his left. His hand rested on the back chair where Illid sat, and some tiny beads of perspiration were forming on the upper lip. Now, I wouldn't mean a finger now if I were you, Clem, said Crane. By the time you lift your hand from that chair to anywhere near that handle of the gun, I'll have at least 2 shots when I suggest to call the man next to you. His reach is much closer. Clem rocked his body a little as his 2 distanced himself from his neighbor. You want to go on the count of 3 now? Asked Crane to the man he had now designated to draw. Now I am no gunslinger. Well, I can see that. You look like a cowsman, and most cowmen are far too busy with cattle business to have a rusty minute left over at the end of the day to practice gunplay now. The cattleman was now nodding in such agreement. When I came out of the army, continued Crane, and went in law, I had to practice. It was part of the job, and all that drawing on fire just kind of sticks naturally forever. The air of the room had changed. It was as if a chill of winter had just come down in the mountains to shiver up the spine. All now paused in anticipation of what happened and what will happen first, which eventually comes in any Mexican standoff. It is decisive to act that seeks with the deal by surprise, and Crane was ready for it. He had talked to two of his four opponents to a standstill and annoyed the hell out of Frank Bellum, but it was his four cattlemen who showed intention to act. It was running all over his face long before he went out for the draw. The challenger's pole was clean and fast, but not fast enough. The muzzle of his handgun had only cleared the holster and was still pointing down towards the floor when Crane got his first shot. It struck its target higher than its end and punched into the lower right throat of the little hollow of his neck. The shock of the impact caused a jerk to a trigger finger, firing a shot just went toward the forward of Crane's feet. As sudden blast was the opening shot, Bowser leaped out of his chair and went to the ground. The two cattlemen to his left of Bellum now moved in unison, and while it remains unclear if they were going to draw or to raise their hands to surrender, it was all too late. While the locomotive is on the way with the full boiler of its steam, it takes a few hundred feet to track the pull up even when the brakes are applied hard. It is the same in a gunfight. The next two shots from Crane both hit the easy mark to cause a mortal wound in each man's chest. The impact of the 44 slugs, traveling at over 600 feet per second, punched like a steel fist deep in the lungs. Both men collapsed to the ground, with one with a double thud. And as the gun smoke cleared, there were just two men sitting, John Crane and Frank Bellum, and each with their eyes fixed on the other. They looked inside for Bellum said, I'm not going for my gun. Why not? Said Crane. I can put my gun back in the holster and we can start over. It'll be a 50-50 chance. We can cut a deal. I'm a powerful man in these parts. What sort of deal would that be? Letting me and this man go free? Kane's eyes glanced towards Bose Dillard, who was still on the floor, but safe. All three of us know that's never going to happen. You'll come after both of us, probably our families too. It's how you got to be where you are. No, this has to end here, right now, so why not take my offer? It leaves you and me with a chance each, and I'm willing to make you call in a draw. And if I don't... Bellum was mustering enough courage and nerve to be defiant. Crane thought for a moment. Then I'll shoot you here anyways. So if you want to be a gold layman now, then you best close your eyes if you don't want to watch what's coming next. Frank's Bellum's face showed the sheer fear, knowing that death is just a moment away. His remaining courage drained away to leave him frozen to one spot. He screwed his eyes tight and began to start. The funeral of the four men didn't draw the crowd expected by the Brunswick mayor, sheriff, and judge. Since most people didn't seem to need to pay their respects, the ones who didn't came mostly to confirm that Bellum and his lieutenants were actually dead and being committed to the earth. John Crane had turned himself into the sheriff immediately after the shootout, and was questioned as the events that resulted in the death of such a prominent citizen and three of his leading hands. His account was that one of it was self-defense, which was supported by Bose Dillard, who stated on oath that Joe Hemming was the man who drew first. After that, he said, all hell broke loose, and it was hard to figure out who was shooting at what. The judge directed the sheriff to arrest both Crane and Lillard. However, the sheriff said, questioned, why? Bellum's gone and I'm no longer in his peril, and nor are you, he reminded the judge. Best we both start over if we want to keep the people of Brunswick to vote for us, so we may keep our jobs. The judge got the message and the sleeping dogs were to die. Of course, this does beg the question, how exactly did I become aware of this event in such detail? Well, I was there. My name is Lawrence Tate, and I was just 14 years old at the time. My father, Benson Tate, owned Tate's General Store. While he was working at the front counter, I had snuck into the bathroom to rest up on the bean stacks in the loft when I should have been sweeping up. From my vantage point, I saw it all go down. When my father found out where I had been during the questioning, he asked, what did you see? I looked my father straight in the eye and said, I saw a Texan stick up for another Texan, and I was sure they were both going to die, but the Texan won out. Because he was fast? Said my dad. I said, yes, he was fast. He's also a lot smarter. My father looked at me for a long while, nodded his head and said, smart is always a better lesson than fast, so I guess you learned a valuable lesson then? Yes, sir, I have. All of that was over 60 years ago, but I can still recall every detail as it was yesterday. And it was just because I witnessed the shooting of four men, I saw far more. I saw the morality needed to render assistance to a stranger when all hope seemed lost. I saw the rare courage required to face the odds and regardless of consequences. I saw the use of the guilt to slowly level the odds that allowed two good men to survive what was shaping up to be a double lynching. This all left a lasting impression that I should carry with me to this day. But I guess, Texans, do what you do. Start showing you what's worth fighting for.